Hello, my friend and fellow lightworker on the path. Welcome to the channel. I'm Josephine Hartman, certified intuitive healer and Akashic Records practitioner and teacher. So I first opened the Akashic Records 21 years ago, and I'm saying that in 2025, and have been working with them professionally for a decade now. So I'm so thrilled that you have tuned in to this video or this podcast episode to get a grounded, no fluff, no nonsense, ethical approach to the Akashic Records and to spirituality. So, however you are tuning in, thank you for being here. Please make sure to hit subscribe, hit that like button, leave a rating or review or a comment below the video if you have questions or topic suggestions for a future episode or video. I would love to hear those as well. So in this video, we're going to be talking about how you can best prepare to get the absolute most out of an Akashic Records reading. No matter who you're getting that reading from or when or where, this is going to serve you as a really grounded guide for how to go into that reading and make it the most productive and empowering and insightful that it can be. And I do think as people who get readings, and I include myself in that category, I still get Akashic Record readings from my longtime teachers and mentors because I believe in the value of doing so. And I believe that that helps me be a better practitioner as well. So as people who get readings, we can do a lot of things to prepare ourselves in advance and make sure that we are showing up with the highest possible frequency and energy and mindset to be able to receive everything that that reading is going to give us. So I'm going to give you some specific tips, and you might see me refer to my notes over here because I wrote down some specific notes to make this as useful and concise as possible. So I'm going to give you 3 tips, but before we get into the 3 tips, we have to establish kind of step 0, which is actually looking for an Akashic Records reader or practitioner that resonates with you. So finding that person, that reader, who's going to deliver the reading for you. And I assume if you are watching this video or listening to this podcast episode, that you probably already have a reading scheduled or you're about to schedule a reading, and that's why you're looking for this kind of guidance. So I assume that you've already done your due diligence on finding that reader or practitioner who you're going to be working with. If you haven't done that yet, or if you want to hear some tips about that as well, then typically this is what I suggest that you bring to that potential reader or practitioner as some initial questions. So before you even schedule with them, before you work with them, some initial questions that you might want to ask them. And rest assured, these are totally respectful questions. So any practitioner who is doing ethical work with the records is going to be more than happy to answer these questions for you and to provide this kind of information. So that already in and of itself could be a little bit of an indicator, or could tell you whether a reader or practitioner is highly ethical, grounded, responsible, all of that. If they're not willing to answer these kinds of questions, you probably would want to move on and find another reader or practitioner. So the questions are really simple. You want to ask any potential Akashic Records reader, first of all, how long have you been working with the Akashic records. And I want to clarify that, of course, sometimes we can discover the records and work with them for a few months or a year and become really, really adept and competent at using the records as a tool for healing and insight with our clients, especially if we've already been doing healing work before or therapeutic work before we find the records. So it doesn't mean necessarily, or I'm not saying necessarily that people need to have been working with the records for decades and decades and decades to be able to be good at it, because sometimes that development can happen really quickly. But generally speaking, I would say you wouldn't want to hire a reader or practitioner to read your Akashic records if, let's say, they've only been working with the records for a couple of weeks, or if they've just done, a weekend course in how to open the records. That's not enough training to be able to guide someone else's healing in the records and to open someone else's records. So you want to ask, how long have you been working with the records? Or even, how and when did you first find the records? Just to get a sense of their story with the records and where they are and that level of connection that they have. You just want to ask a little bit about that. And so very similarly, question number 2, you also want to ask, have you been trained or are you certified in reading the Akashic records for other people? And again, with a disclaimer, right? Because not everyone who is certified in this is going to be a good reader. So just because someone is certified doesn't immediately mean that they're going to be the best reader. And really, depending on where they got certified, who certified them, what the process was, there's a lot of nuance in that. But you do want to ask, have they been trained? For how long have they been trained? Who trained them? What's the method that they use? These are really important questions to ask because you want to make sure that this practitioner or reader has sufficient training, has practical experience working with the records for themselves and with other people, opening the records of other people. And you also want to make sure that they're operating under the highest ethical standards, which is often something that we work on when we get trained or certified in how to read the records, ethical standards, ethical considerations in how to read for others. That's generally part of a really good practitioner training. So you want to ask about that. And then I think another question, really important question to ask is of this reader, potential reader. So are they able to do healing work or energy work if something comes up in the records that requires healing work? Because sometimes in a reading, we're going to uncover things that need a little bit of healing work or energy work, or where we need the reader's assistance in shifting something or releasing something, or there might be emotions that come up that need to be processed in the reading or the session. So you want to make sure that this reader or practitioner has the skills, again, and the training to be able to offer that energy work or healing work if something were to come up in the reading that calls for that. So you want to make sure that this practitioner is kind of well-rounded and that in addition to knowing how to read the records, which is of course fundamental, but in addition to that, that they have some other skills, that they understand how energy works, that they are competent and trained enough to do healing work to help you release whatever may come up if a release is needed. So those are some things to check for. Okay, so let's go into tip number one. So once you've found that reader who is totally resonating with you, you are loving their method and how they've answered these questions, if you have asked them these questions, and it feels good, and you're getting a strong intuitive hit to move forward with the reading, and you've scheduled the reading. So once that's already done, the next thing you want to do after scheduling the reading is to get really quiet. So ideally, you're going to have at least a few days or even a day before the reading once you've scheduled it, or you might have longer than that, depends on the reader's schedule and all of that, the logistical details. But ideally, you're going to have at least a little bit of time where you can get really quiet and just spend some time with yourself in those days or hours leading up to the reading. So spend some time in quiet reflection and introspection within yourself. And this will be a great time, also, if you're meditating during this time, to notice a few things. So, one is, are there any patterns that you are wanting to shift? Any patterns that you've been observing in yourself that have been coming up? So, patterns, habits, beliefs that you want to release or get to the bottom of, or better understand where they're coming from. You want to start to reflect on all of that and just spend some time meditating on that. You might also want to ask yourself, where do you need more insight or healing in your life? Where do you need more insight or healing, or both, in your life? So, again, is there something like a people-pleasing pattern, just to throw something out? And I often mention that because I myself am a recovering people pleaser. So that's my go-to pattern for examples. But it could be any other pattern as well. So is it that you are seeking validation from outside of yourself? Is it that you have a pattern of overextending yourself to care for everyone else? Is it that you have some very intense anger or sadness or fear coming up, and you're not quite sure where that's coming from? And you need some help taking a look at that or releasing that and expressing that. What is that pattern or that habit or maybe that stuckness that you are experiencing, where you need to get more insights, where you need to get some healing? Maybe something where it feels like you've tried to heal it before, but it still continues to repeat itself or show up again. Maybe some area in your life where you may have a blind spot, which we all have. A reader or practitioner is ideally there to help you with those kinds of things. So just spend some time quietly reflecting on all of this. Even better if you can sit down and journal about some of the stuff, because it's going to start to give you a lot of material for what you can potentially bring to the reading or the session. So step number 2 is to create a main question. So based on whatever you discover as you ask these introspective questions of where you most need healing right now, from there you can pull out kind of the main theme that's coming up, or the main topic, or the main issue that you've been trying to resolve in your life. So you can create a main question for your reading. And here I also want to give a little bit of a disclaimer, because as readers, we all have different methods and processes and intake processes even. So you might work with a reader where you formulate the question together once you get to the session. You might work with a reader where they ask you to submit the question in advance. You may work with a reader who is happy to answer 10 different questions. For me, as a reader and as a teacher, so someone who teaches other people how to read the records for their clients, my philosophy really is let's focus on one main question per reading, one deep, really well articulated, thoughtful, meaningful question so that we can look at it from every possible angle and we can go really deep instead of just staying kind of at the surface level of the question. So I prefer to work with one question, two questions at most, rather than trying to answer 25 different questions in 1 hour session, because that we're only going to get to the surface of those if we're trying to rush in that way. So create your main question. Of course, if you need help from your reader formulating the question, reach out to them. I think a really good reader is open to that as well if you need help with that. So just reach out and then start to formulate that main question. That's going to allow you to be really focused, and it's going to help the session and the reading be super focused and clear, and you're going to be able to go really, really deep. And step number 3, or tip number 3, and this is for right before the reading. So let's say the day of the reading, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 15 minutes before the reading, whatever works for you. Get into a receptive state. It's so important to do this. And sometimes, of course, life is busy. We have many things scheduled in a day, so we might forget to do this step, but it's so important and it can greatly determine the outcome of the reading and your level of receptivity. So your level of receptivity is essential in determining the outcome of the reading. Just as the reader or the practitioner has to be properly trained and has to do their work to show up and serve you at the highest possible level and be totally present with you and be a clear channel for the records, which takes a lot of work behind the scenes. As people getting readings, there's also that little bit of work that we can put in initially before the reading, which can have a huge impact on how the reading goes. So get yourself into a receptive state. And of course, you can do that through any method or approach that works for you. Maybe it's a little meditation before the reading. Maybe you go for a walk out in nature, or you sit out in nature. Maybe it's about doing a little bit of journaling, clearing some things out before you step into the reading. Maybe doing some breath work, maybe sitting, holding your crystals, or pulling a card for yourself. That can be super helpful if you want to pull a card and just ask, how can I be most receptive to what this reading is going to offer me? And then pull a card from an oracle deck or a tarot deck, whatever you work with, and see what you get. Because ultimately, the idea here is that I want you to cultivate an attitude of openness and trust and curiosity and just really being willing to receive whatever this reading is going to offer you and bring you, trusting that it's going to be for your highest good and healing. If you can bring that attitude into the reading, if you can bring that energy into the reading, it's going to be so much more powerful. You're going to be able to collaborate energetically with your reader, and you're going to be able to go a lot deeper. So that is step number 3. Yeah, so the reading is going to be so much more productive if you can get yourself into that receptive state initially. Okay, so I hope that's been helpful. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to suggest, well, just one thought that's coming to mind as well, which is if you have done your due diligence and you have asked your reader, their story with the records and how were they trained and what's their way of working and their method, and you have all that information and you feel very safe with them and you feel a resonance with them, that really, really helps to be able to bring this attitude of trust and just letting go and allowing the reader to guide you, and really fully feeling totally safe in working with this particular person, which is why it's so important to do that initial work of sort of vetting that reader or practitioner, because it's going to help you feel a lot safer and it's going to enable you to trust them again at a deeper level. So, with that said, I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions about anything we have addressed today, please again feel free to leave a comment below, or you can send a note to me at josephinehartman.com. If you haven't yet joined my email community, I would love to invite you to do so. It is completely free, and you get access to my free Akashic Records mini course that walks you step by step into my process for how to read your own Akashic Records for personal healing and guidance. So I'm going to drop the link to that in the show notes or the video description below. Take really great care of yourself. If you do have an Akashic Records reading scheduled and it's coming up shortly, I am so excited for you. I know if you apply some of these tips, it's going to be an amazing experience. You're going to get exactly what you most need. And I'm so excited for that. So thank you again for tuning in. Take really great care of yourself. Enjoy your readings, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.